Hey everyone, my name is Ben Chaish, and today we're looking at another super exciting lens for the Fujifilm X-mount system. It is a lens that I just actually bought the Sony native equivalent to, and that is the Viltrox 13mm f1.4. Now here's something I want to address a little bit. There are some big time purists out there that will only use native glass and all of that kind of stuff. I am not one of those people. I am of the mindset that I want to spend the money on the pieces that I use most frequently. And if I'm going to be using a lens for maybe 75% of the time on a camera body for a paid gig, that's where I'm going to spend my money. And my general recommendation to people is that then if you want to get some kind of other lenses outside of that, that's where those third-party lenses I feel are generally the best value, which is why I'm so excited about this Viltrox 13mm f1.4. This lens is not exactly inexpensive, but it's not exactly expensive at the same time. For what it is, I think it is very, very well priced. It's less than half the price I paid for the Sony version, but within the Fujifilm ecosystem at least, their lenses are relatively inexpensive in comparison to other, full frame manufacturers. So while I think the price is great, and I have no issues with them charging what they charge, it's just not as competitive as when you're looking into other systems. That being said, I think this lens fits a fantastic spot in the Fujifilm lineup, and it was really good of Viltrox to make this, because at 13mm on a crop censored body, you're looking at roughly a 20mm field of view, which is something that I used to have the 14mm f2.8 from Fujifilm, but that lens was a 2.8 lens, where this lens is a 1.4 lens. So you're getting a whole heck of a lot more light gathering capabilities here. I'll say the build quality is really fantastic. It feels really nice. The lens hood is even a metal lens hood, so they didn't cheap out there at all. The aperture ring is nice and clicky. The focusing ring is clearly like a focus by wire type of thing, but it feels smooth enough. It's definitely not my favorite system overall, but you just kind of got to work with what you have. And then just like the other Viltrox lenses that I've used, it has a USB-C port on the bottom to allow you to do firmware updates. If you would just have rebranded this and put on Fujifilm's branding and whatnot and just said it was a new lens from Fujifilm, I 100% would have believed you. Now, as you can see as well, the lens isn't exactly small. It's one of those lenses where if you have a grip like I do on this Xe4, and again, this is also the Xe4, so it's gonna be the smaller of the Fujifilm cameras, it's gonna look kind of large and annoying, but for what it is, again, a 1.4 lens at roughly 20mm, it's not that bad. I recently took this on a wedding shoot with me and ended up using it for some of the establishing shots and the ceremony and whatnot. And even just having it around my neck, it wasn't much of a nuisance. Clearly it is gonna be front heavy just because of the balance on a small camera like this. But overall, carrying it around, especially if you have a grip, isn't too bad. I would say that it's not necessarily like your everyday walk around lens, but even if you wanted to do something like vlog with it, I wouldn't say that would be much of an issue at all, because you can just hold it by the lens. I just basically tripod it with my finger and then hold it, in the palm of my hand like this. And especially for even like office talking head stuff, for YouTube, all of that goodness, I really do love the 20mm focal length, and it kind of does a really good job of being that in-between lens of being pretty wide, but also not being ultra wide where, things are distorting like crazy. And it also gives a pretty unique field of view.
So here we are on the Xe4, just holding it by the lens. Obviously there is no IBIS on this camera, so it's going to be a downfall in terms of vlogging stuff. But it's a very compact and inexpensive setup, so there's that. Also, from a vlogging standpoint, which I obviously don't do a lot, having the screen above like this instead of off to the side, I feel like I can always tell when people on videos are doing this. But there's something about this that's like looking above it that doesn't bother me as much. I feel like I see like other tech YouTubers, like even MKBHD and stuff like that, looking up and over. So I don't know why that bothers me, but for what it's worth, I do like the screen above. So here's generally what this looks like. And yeah. So here we are at like arm's length. I'm going to move this focusing, because that's the other thing, is like the focusing is good, not great. So then I just moved it up to where my face is, but right now it isn't tracking my eyes. I feel like it was always good when I was using it on video or on photo though.
So right here we have the FX3 and the Sony 20mm G. And then here we have the XE4 with the Viltrox 13 1.4. Both lenses are at f4 and are just using the basic tracking stuff. So for a general studio shot, I'd honestly be pretty surprised if there was like a massive difference, considering this is a pretty darn controlled environment. So all that's great, but how well does it perform? Let's check it out. So I was very impressed with this lens in terms of chromatic aberration and even softness in the corners, wide open at 1.4. I also found the autofocus to work really well, and even on a lower end body like the XE4, it face tracked in at least photography mode really well. Generally, I just had like zero issues with anything about how the lens functioned, and was really easy to use and walk around with and carry around. So if I was using this as part of a full professional kit with like an X-T4 or an X-T3 or an X Pro 3, this is something I would 100% consider putting in my bag, because you're getting the extra light gathering of 1.4, and if you want the extra, you know, sharpness and all that kind of stuff, stopping down to 2.8 like the original Fujifilm one definitely works. When it was originally released way back with the X Pro 1, Fujifilm actually sent me the X Pro 1, the 35 1.4, the 18 to 55 kit lens, and then the 14 2.8. And it was my first kind of foray into a ultra wide style lens. And for wedding stuff, it ended up being a really cool lens that at first I was annoyed at, and then definitely started missing, which is why if you've watched this channel since the almost beginning, I did a big video on the Voigtlander 21mm f1.8, because I just really loved that wider perspective. And this totally gives that same kind of look and feel on the Fujifilm system. So overall, I absolutely recommend this lens. Most people aren't going to be using a 20mm equivalent lens as like a primary lens for anything. But if you're okay with the weight and the extra size of this, which I am for sure, I think this is a great lens to have around in a kit to provide a wider field of view. The f1.4 for someone like me that does weddings is incredibly helpful. And it's definitely one of those things where I can stop down and use it for dancing photos with a direct flash, and can give my Leicas a break if needed. So I think you get a ton of bang for the buck out of this thing. They're putting an STM motor, spherical elements, low dispersion elements, whatever all of these other things mean on here. I mean, it's just a fantastic lens, and especially for wide angle stuff at weddings, for video stuff, for vlogging, if you're into that, it's kind of one of those things that is a no-brainer for me. So thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in this lens, I definitely have a link down below. Subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you all on the next one.